Great guy in the studio today, Caleb Waid. Caleb grew up not being around his dad. And in later years, some great things happened. I won't spoil it all for you. But Caleb's a really inspirational guy. He's one of our script flippers. He's a guy who made a choice that he was going to turn things around, do things different. And man, it's just a great story. If you're a dad who's messed up and you need to be encouraged to go back, and it's never too late, you need to see this. Or if you're a young man who's growing up and dad's just left you, don't know how to handle that, then the interview with Caleb Waid is going to mean a lot to you. As I was listening to it, I just began to cry.
And I was thinking, Lord, man, I don't even know why you'd even ask me to go do this. What do I have to offer? And I just remember moving to the steps and watching this massive fight.
You know, it's that old story of, hey, when they start getting scholarship offers, dad comes out of nowhere.
I don't want to work hard at something that means nothing. People just like loving him, and it didn't make me angry. I was proud that was my dad.
The strongest love ever is the love that a child has for their parent.
What I wanted to say was, well, if I make enough tackles, my dad will show up.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the podcast where we're talking to script flippers, guys who turn things around, guys who may have came up in a less than ideal situation and decided, hey, I can fix this, I can do better, I can change my next generation. And in the studio today is a guy that's got an incredible story. Caleb Waid is with us. Drove a long way to get here, Caleb. Thanks so much for coming.
No, man, happy to be here. You guys got an awesome studio, man. I enjoyed coming in, taking a look at everything, man. It's awesome in here.
It's top notch, isn't it? So we're thrilled to have you here. I got to talk to you by phone the other day and heard your story. And man, I guess I should confess to you that as I was listening to it, I just began to cry.
Yeah.
Because through the years, as I've worked with kids who've come out of difficult situations, I've seen so many that came out of the same kind of situation that you experienced growing up. And I thought to myself, man, if I could have just let them hear this guy's story, give them a little hope. So, hey, man, you can do it. You can pull through this thing. You can turn it around. Well, it's pretty obvious you're an athlete. I don't want to call you a former athlete and hurt your feelings, but when you put a football player,
I used to play a little ball.
play some college ball. And your high school coach recommended you, and Barry Ryan said you had a great story. So let's just jump back to, well, first of all, tell us what you're doing now.
I've been a student pastor for the last 19 years, and my wife and I, we've just tried to pour into students' lives, and really the calling from that, I didn't know really when I felt the calling to get into ministry. That wasn't something that happened when I was 11. That happened when I was in college, and I was thinking, Lord, man, I don't even know why you'd even ask me to go do this. What do I have to offer? I'm not in a student ministry anyway. I don't go to student ministry. I mean, I love the Lord. I love my church. I'm not that kind of. I don't do those things. And now after this almost 19 years of it, the amount of times I've had to walk through situations with students where I'm like, hey, man, me too, man. I walk through that. The connection level, you just see the Lord just saying, no, this is why I was asking you to come do this. And so that's kind of what we're doing now. We've got 3 kids now, and my wife and I, we've been married for 15 years now. 15 or 16. I need to check on that. 15 or 16 years.
You're in Gardendale, Alabama.
Gardendale First Baptist Church is where I'm at. Yeah.
Alabama. Good deal. So a lot of people would look at you and say, man, this guy probably had, probably had a silver spoon in his mouth when he was born. He probably had a gravy life coming up. Nothing could be farther from the truth.
Yeah.
Let's go back and kind of unwrap your family story for me.
Yeah, sure. I tell even adults, students, it doesn't matter. I mean, think back of your earliest memory that you have. What is the earliest memory? Not because you saw a video or a picture, but the earliest memory that you can think of. And for me, it kind of always sits around about that 2nd or 3rd grade. And I remember when the story we're talking about now, kind of it's starting to form and take place in my own world. I remember, being in a split level house, and I remember sitting in the den, the bottom area, and for the first time, I remember I see my mom sitting on the chair, my dad sitting on the couch, one sister sitting in front of my mom, one sister sitting next to my dad, and I just hear them argue, and they're yelling, but that wasn't common, but they were fighting, and I just remember moving to the steps and watching this massive fight, and everybody was sit back in their chair, but now everybody's on the end of their chair and there's pointing, and I don't even know what they're arguing about. I just very vivid. I could tell you what people were wearing. I could tell you that whole moment. And I don't know if it was right then or very shortly after. I just remember taking a trash bag to my dad's truck and then him getting in the truck and he left. And that was the beginning of what I began to understand as divorce. And that journey, which a lot of people walk through, that was the journey on my end of the start of probably the story.
So how old were you when that happened?
I was in third grade. As
a third grader, do you recall what it felt like to see your dad packing his bags? And
it was more I can tell it affects me because I'm 38 now. I mean, how old are you in third grade? 10? Holding this trash bag, taking it to the truck. And I just even remember putting it in the passenger seat and having this thought of like, well, I guess I'm not going to sit in there. I guess this trash is sitting there. I mean, I don't know what's in this bag, and just those to walking back into, it's just awkward, the awkwardness. And then you leave and, third grade, we're not really spending the night with friends yet. That didn't really take effect of like, my house is very different than your house until I got into middle school. And I was looking around and I was kind of embarrassed about my home, embarrassed about what we had or what we didn't have. And so people didn't come to my house. And it wasn't an abusive house. It wasn't a bad house. It wasn't, a crazy house. I was just embarrassed about my house.
Did you look around and see the other guys had dads?
Yeah, well, but at this time, you got to think there were 34 divorces between my parents, my wife's parents, and our grandparents.
Really?
34. All right. Now, one of them's got 14, all right, so he's the outlier, okay? But anyway, but that was just in our family. There was just divorce. And that just, that's probably why it wasn't weird yet. And it wasn't weird until I got to middle school and I realized like, hey, there's some people that they're still married. And that's probably when you start getting invited to houses. Hey man, you want to come to my house? Hey, you want to come stay over here? And that was where about seventh grade is when it started hitting really hard, where I think I began to start forming anger towards my dad because every other weekend turned into every other month. And then I remember sixth grade was the first time I didn't go to Christmas. We didn't have Christmas together. And then there was no birthday. And so it was very selfish. Okay. But those things just weren't happening.
Did you ever get the idea in your head that this is my family. This is the way we are. This is who I am. This is the way I'm going to be. Did you ever kind of feel like that was going to be your path as well?
I remember, my mom's pretty transparent about things. And so anytime I had a question, she would be very transparent. And so sometimes I quit asking questions because she was so transparent, But I think any question that I had, she would answer very honestly. And I think that helped out. And I think that's probably why I quit asking questions, because I just didn't want to know. I didn't want to know why you got divorced. I didn't want to know. Yeah. I didn't want to know why he wasn't here. I just wanted to let it go away. I wanted to go away. And I found for the first time a sport that I don't need anybody else in. I can do this my own. And so I can play football on my own. I don't need anybody else. I can make a name for my own self. I don't need anybody else. And I think that was where the world was. You know what? Girls don't have to like me because of what I have or because of my parents and all that stuff. Girls can like me because I can be a stud on the field. And that was probably that world going on in my head of I'll just take all my energy and effort and I'm just going to block out everything that's going on in my family and I'm just going to start pursuing football.
So you just
kind of sports.
You focused on the sports. That became your outlet. That became your release, and it kind of helped you to tuck it all away. And but deep inside, do you, did your dad come and ever come and see your games, or just come around and be interested in you?
Yeah. So I'll give you an overview from sixth grade all the way to high school.
Okay.
What that world looked like. I would say it got pushed to the back of my mind that, hey, my dad's not around because I filled it with something else in this world. I remember 8th grade, my dad showing up at a game for the first time, but he showed up at halftime. Okay. And I remember when he walked in, the first play of halftime, the very next series at halftime, I ran the ball and I broke my leg.
Oh.
I mean, he just got there, and it was the first series I broke my leg. And so I remember being in pain, looking up, and he was carrying me off the field, with a bunch of guys. And, but I was thinking, like, I mean, it's been a year and a half. This is the first time you've come. And I was so excited, like, man, I'll get to prove, like, I'm a man. Look, I want you to see what I can do,
Yeah.
And the first play, I break my leg, and he's carrying me off the field. And so, people are meeting him for the first time, I think, and they're, they kind of knew my mom, and they're meeting him. And so most coaches, you're not tied into their parents. You just might see them in a moment like that, and you're like, oh, okay, hey, how you doing? So now you just have a connection to who their parent is. Mm-hmm. And so I would say from that moment on, coaches just didn't ask me about my dad. Just because he's been at games, he knows who he is, like he's at these things. But I was like, no, he gave one play, and this is what happened.
One play in 8th grade.
Yeah,
and that was at the end of the season for you.
That was I tore my tibula, and it messed it up pretty bad, so I was out. And I would like to say the season went downhill from there after that, but I think they won every game after that, so I don't think I really mattered. But anyway, but no, so I remember going into high school and really just honed in on learning how to play one position, playing linebacker. And about 11th grade, I remembered, and at this point, he hadn't showed up at any games, hadn't done any of those things, and there's zero relationship.
Are you not having visits with him?
Yeah, that hadn't happened since 6th grade.
Wow.
And so there's no visits, there's nothing, and it was just obsolete, not in my life at all. And I remember in 11th grade, after we got finished playing a home game, a guy came up to me and said, hey man, are you so-and-so's son? Hey, did your dad used to play at this school? And then I said, yes, sir. And when I said that, he said, man, that's crazy. He said, I knew you had to be his son. You played just like him.
Really?
And he's like, how's he doing? I said, man, he's doing good, man. He's an officer, and he's working. I basically lied. I don't know. I hadn't talked to him.
You covered for him.
I don't have a clue, and now I would say that started happening multiple times when I was in 11th grade, where people that knew him were like, man, what's he doing? How's he doing? And we're just lying. And I remember watching on the news one night, him saving somebody's life. And he had saved somebody's life, and he was being interviewed, pulled somebody out of a fire, and we're all four of us are just sitting in front of the TV watching it.
Wow.
But this is the first time we're hearing from him.
The first time you see your dad is
and people
on TV.
are praising him, and it was just like, and so I think I started to grow bitterness inside. That's when it started to grow. And I got to my senior year, and it was a great senior year. I remember, if you're looking for stats, I had the stats. I had the stats. I was getting put in the paper. I was doing all those things, and I remember thinking, up to this point, I had bitterness, but I still knew there was some love still left in there, because every Sunday I used his Bible. That's what I had, And I remember, it was, I think 3 or 4 games in, we were playing Mountain Brook, and I remember that morning my mom knocked on my door and my room, and I answered, and she said, hey, look at this. And it was a huge picture on the front page of me, and it said just Waid gets tough, and it's this whole thing about the defense at Clay, and it was an article on my brother and I. My brother played linebacker right next to me, and it was just a huge thing. And I thought, there's no way, and there was a game of the week, and I was like, there's no way that he won't see this and he won't show up.
So y'all were really good, by the way.
We got after it,
Yeah, it was a very notable high school football team. Most dads, even the ones that aren't active with their kids, will show up. It's that old story of, hey, when they start getting scholarship offers, dad comes out of nowhere. Yeah. That happens all the time. So you're thinking, well, we're doing great. 2 sons starting. We've made the headlines.
Yeah. I remember the call that night, I guess it was 2 days before, and it was a writer for the newspaper had called and said, hey, and he wanted to talk to my brother and I, and he talked to us, and he wanted to know, how are you making so many tackles to this? Because at this point, I think I was averaging 18 to 20 tackles a game, and it was, we were almost 3 or 4 games in. And he said, how are you getting to that? And I remember my initial, what I wanted to say, but what I ended up saying was, hey, man, we have a great defensive line. Hey, we got a great coach. We got all these things. I mean, they're just making plays in front of them. They're holding people down. Let me flow. I mean, it's not me, it's them, and I think that's kind of how, when you're a captain, you got to give it to the team. That's how you answer it. In the back of my mind, what I wanted to say was, well, if I make enough tackles, my dad will show up.
Wow.
But you don't, that's just in your head. And you're thinking, man, but I know, hey, if I say the right things and I do the right stuff, you'll put it in there, and it'll be like, man, I got to show up because look what he's accomplished, look what he's done, and I'm proud of him. And so you have, that desire within you to like prove, hey, I'm a man, and it was slowly building up. And so I remember getting to that senior year, and I remember it was game of the week, and I remember every time I came to the sideline, just scanning the whole audience, just scanning everybody in the crowd, scanning the fence. And I was like, well, maybe, Ben, maybe he doesn't know, he's probably on the guest side, So I remember, being so distracted, looking at the guest side, looking at all those things. I remember I had to average 18 to 20 tackles that game. That game, I was so distracted. I had 3 tackles that whole game.
Looking for your dad in the stands.
It was, and I remember meeting people that were coming in to talk to me about, recruiters, things like that. I remember meeting them before the game, all that kind of stuff, talking to them. At the end of the game, there's nothing. There's no call. There's nothing, because they all showed up and had 3 tackles. And I remember it was a terrible night, and I didn't care anymore at that point. I didn't care about him. I didn't care about what he wanted to do. I didn't care about any of that. Went through the whole rest of the year, got to the end of the year, and was nominated for McCarthy for Defensive Player of the Year, Quarterback Club Defensive Player of the Year. Then you had the Alabama All-Star Game, got nominated to go to that. And when you do that, they send you some invitations to, hey, invite people to this. And so they took 3 of them. So one went to my mom, one went to my grandparents, and then the other one, I took my dad's child support check and I got his address and I sent it to him. And it was almost like in my mind, the last Hail Mary that I had in my head of like, obviously you can see like 40 players got nominated for this and I'm one of them. Like, you're going to show up, and it's sent to your address. And so I remember coming out of the tunnel at the game and all your family's there waiting on you, just saying congratulations and cheering you up. And he wasn't there. And I hated him. And I just did not care. I didn't care if he died on the job. I didn't care if I saw him again. I just didn't care. And I remember playing so angry that game. I think it was an awesome game. I think I played really well. I think people were asking me, are you okay? And I'm thinking, well, I think I was ripping heads, and I was so angry. And, which you can play that way on defense. On offense, you probably need to think through some things. But, on defense, you just play. You're just getting after it. Here's this ball, go get it. You just be angry. And so I remember playing that way, and went to college, played, nothing. And anger and bitterness fueled me. And what I've seen connected to most students and athletes, because I'm chaplain at a football team as well, is bitterness will make you feel real strong because you got something. Bitterness will make you feel like you've got something. Anger and bitterness, that will fuel you and it'll make you feel strong inside, but it just ruins your life. That's all it does. It makes you see one side of something. It makes you get really, you're angry. You miss the blessings of God because of an attitude. You forget what the Lord's doing all around you because you're mad about something. And so that's where I spent probably the next 3 years of my life, was just bitter and angry.
And your dad still has nothing to do with you?
No. And I remember how that happened. I remember being at my first Christian camp. to ever go. I didn't go to them because I thought they were corny. All right. So anyway, I remember going to a Christian camp for the first time. It was all East Tennessee athletes, college athletes. And there was about 120 of us, and they took us to some camp in Tennessee. And I remember there accepting the call into ministry. And it was weird because I remember calling my girlfriend at the time and saying like, hey, I'm going to be a student pastor. And she laughed at me. And she's in Mississippi at the time. And she laughed at me. She's like, you don't even read your Bible. And I was like, I know, this is why I know it's true, like, or like, hey, you've been in a youth group. And I was like, no, so that was 19 years ago. And so anyway, but I remember that conversation, which I'm married to her now. But I remember accepting the call, and 2 weeks before I started the position of being a student pastor, I thought to myself, I felt good about everything, felt good about where my life was, but how can I go tell students to, hey, let's, walk with your family, honor your father and mother, if I'm not doing that with my own dad and I haven't given the effort, and how can I do that? And so I remember sitting there saying like, all right, God, I'll do it one time. I'll do it. And making that, I don't know if it was a deal, I just said, Lord, I'm going to go do that. This is another story, but my sister was, at this point, she had her firstborn, and her husband was serving overseas in Iraq. And I remember she was walking through the airport, and she saw my dad. We hadn't seen him forever, and saw my dad and said, she passed by him. He had his bomb dog, and he was walking through, and he said, she said she was just walking by and said, Dad, and he about tripped over the dog, and said, hey, do you want to hold your granddaughter? And I don't know what that did to him just then, but we were all, he put the dog up, came home, and she said, hey, well, we're all of us are here. My two sisters, my brother, we're all here. We're all playing college sports. Said, hey, we're all here right now for this next month. Do you want to go eat with us? And so he agreed, said, yeah, let's do that. And so I remember we walked into a restaurant. And when we did, you got to understand, my oldest sister she was in ninth grade. Then other sister was in, seventh grade. I was in sixth grade. My brother was in fourth grade the last time he was around us. We walked into that restaurant. My sister had just had her first kid. Mary Beth was playing college softball. I just got finished playing college football. My brother was playing college baseball at Georgia. And we walked into, we were bigger than he was. And we were looking at his face, we looked different. And I remember that day very well. I remember walking up to him, just giving him a hug. And just said, the first thing came and said, hey, man, I love you. And we sat down at the table and we talked, which was really weird because what do you talk about? My family, we like to joke around about things that happened in the past, but can you do that right now? Because he wasn't there. So what did we talk about? I don't remember anything that we talked about. I don't remember anything. All I remember was walking in, give him a hug, and told him I love him. I knew at that point, hey, all the things that I hated or I had anger about, it was all very selfish.
So what do you think would have happened when you went to meet your dad? Mm-hmm. If you'd have said, Dad, I'm mad about this. I'll never forgive you.
Yeah.
Where do you think you would be now?
You can go back and think of moments like that. Okay, what if I would have said this? Well, I think everything that I feel like I've done and what I do now is based off of Jesus and what he did a long time ago and what he's constantly doing. Everything I do is based off of that. But if I didn't base it off of that and I did it off of something else, my life would be completely different.
Yeah, because you would have probably said, hey, Dad, you left us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen you since third grade, really.
Yeah.
You weren't at when I made the high school All-Star game, you weren't there.
Yeah.
When I was making 18 tackles a game, you weren't there. When I graduated, you weren't there.
Yeah.
When I met my wife, you weren't there. When my brother when I went on the field with Georgia to play baseball, you weren't there. When my sister broke the stolen base record, you weren't there.
When my sister was getting married, you weren't there.
Yeah, all those things. You could have just gone on and on and on and on. But something within you said, what's the use? I've got to forgive the guy.
I think at that point in my life, the expectation of like, well, I hope you bring with you 7 birthday gifts when you show up. I think the expectation list that I had of like, hey, if you want me not to be mad at you anymore, here's the checkoff list. Okay, like I think if you had asked me a year ago, I think I would have had a checkoff list. I think I would have had that. But I think what happened is, before I started, I remember that night when 2 weeks before I started, and I was talking to the Lord, and I just remember even that night after meeting with, my dad, I just remember going to my room, and my head's on the pillow. I'm, trying to catch the blades on the fan. I'm just sitting there looking at the fan, and I remember saying, man, Father, thank you so much for this. And I remember that was the first time in my life I'd ever called God Father. And I'm stepping into student ministry. I've never even called him Father before. And I think part of that was because up to that point he hadn't been my father. I didn't want another father. And so you have to start looking at what the Lord has. The Lord never missed a game. The Lord's always there. Like the Lord, he counted my steps. The Lord built the city. The Lord watched over the city. Like all the things that I've done apart from him were just in vain. Like, and I just remember the feel of like, I have a father. I got a heavenly Father. And until you walk through a moment that just sounds cliche, but until you realize like, man, I got a heavenly Father. There's no need to be mad at anybody. So I think what the Lord did in my own life personally behind the scenes affected what happened and what came out of my mouth in front of people.
So how did it go from that meeting?
There was an effort on his part. I think he was just looking for a door. Honestly, like, hey, now that I'm a dad, I think I realized that like you just want a door. Like I don't even know what to do now. I just need a door. And I think he found the door. I think we were all very open to saying like, hey, Dad, come on, let's go. We were all that way. And I think from that, it was a constant effort on both people's part to check in. We didn't see each other every day, but I remember when I moved back here from Mississippi, I remember driving the U-Haul truck and talking to my wife and saying, we were moving back to Gardendale. We didn't have a place to stay because we were looking for a place to buy. And so we were like, well, let's just go live somewhere for a little bit with some of our family. My dad lives the closest. I was like, well, let's go live in my dad's house for a little bit. And we're driving the U-Haul saying, well, this is going to be weird. Last time I lived with him, I was in 3rd grade. And I said, now I'm bringing 5 people with me, like, I wonder what this is going to be like. And there's still, for anybody, any athlete, any young man that has been hurt. You usually hurt really bad one time in your life, really, really bad. And most of the time it's your dad did it to you. Okay. That just happens. I understand that. As you're walking and you think, hey, well, I'll just connect with him again and things will be back to normal. They won't. They're not going to be back to normal. Okay. It will be something new. Yeah, it'll be new and it'll be great. But there are things that like are always going to be awkward. When my sons ask my dad about something about me in middle school,
he doesn't know.
He doesn't know.
Wow.
And he doesn't try to lie about it, or anything. He just kind of avoids the conversation. But I'm just, those things are all awkward. You have, there's spaces that you wish you belonged in, like there's conversations you wish you were a part of, but like they're not going to be there. You don't have to be angry and mad about it. Like you're just working on something new and you're going from there. And that has helped me in who I've become as a dad. That has probably been the most beneficial. I remember, my wife and I were not perfect by any means, but I remember every relationship that was probably getting divorced in my family was all 11 years. And my wife and I, we've been married 15. My brothers and sisters, they've all been married 15 years or more. And we've great marriages, great families. Like, I mean, the curse of that is broken. Like that's not in our family. And you just see the Lord working through that. My kids don't know anybody other than awesome granddaddy.
Yeah.
That's who they know.
So I want to move forward for the people that are watching today.
Yeah.
You and your dad have a great relationship.
Yeah, we do have a great relationship. It's not. I mean, there's moments that are still probably awkward with conversation, but I mean, if I left out of here and called him right now, I mean, there's nothing weird or awkward. Like we talk, hang out, a good bit.
So I want to offer a little hope to somebody out there. It might be a dad who's messed up.
Yeah,
who's not done it right. Got his own interest ahead of his family, and you've left your kids, and there's hope. And the thing, one of the things I know from working with kids for so long, people talk about the love that a mother has for her child, being the strongest love ever. It's not.
Yeah.
The strongest love ever is the love that a child has for their parents.
Yeah.
Because they will forgive, and they'll defend. You tell a story of you lost a job through really no fault of your own, but it was a good job, and you
can say I got fired.
Stuff happens. And
I'm out of they said for 2 years I couldn't tell anybody that, but it's been past 2 years, so I got fired.
You called your wife to tell her.
Yeah.
And she said, well, don't you think you should call your dad? And you thought, why should I do that? But tell us that story of what your dad said to you.
I remember, so I worked at a church, and I got asked to leave, and I remember, asking why, and there was no answer, and which sounds weird, but that's true. But anyway, and I remember coming home, telling my wife, and the funny part of that story, I walked in, and my wife is feeding our kid. We just had a baby. She's feeding our kid, and then our other kid was pooping in the bathroom. And I remember her walking in when he said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Could you go wipe our kid?" So I just got fired. I walked in the house, and now I'm going wiping my kid's tail. And so anyway, I come back and sit down. I told her, and we walked through that for a little bit. And about 24 hours after that, she said, "Have you told your dad?" And I was like, "Well, why won't I do that?" I mean, that didn't even come across my mind. I mean, we had a great relationship too at this point. Like, why would I do that? And she's like, "What do you mean?" She sounded like that was so weird to me. She's like, "Why don't you tell me?" I was like, "Well, what is he going to tell me? Like, he's going to tell me, oh, I'm sorry. Like, what is he going to tell me, babe?" And she's like, "If this happened to your kid, would you want him to tell you?" And I was like, "Heck yeah." And she's like, "Well," and so I picked up the phone thing, and what is he gonna tell me? And so I called him, told him, and I remember sitting in my car because I had run an errand. I was coming in. I was thinking this call will last 30 seconds. And I was in my car for about 25 minutes. And I remember he said, "Hey, I just want to tell you, I don't, there's nothing really good to say right now. And I don't know how much wisdom I have to tell you. I'll just tell you about my life." And he just said, "Hey man, I feel like I've lost things, in my life." And he said, "I just remember being at moments where I feel like I've lost a lot. Lost everything, and he said one moment I just remember looking over and thinking I don't have anything else. And he said, "But Lord, I got that truck out there. You can have it. You can have that truck. And that's all I got left. You can have it all, Lord. You do what you want. It's yours." He said, I remember praying that prayer, and he said, "I'll tell you what's crazy is," he said, "right after that, I ran into your sister at the airport." He said, then right after that, I was sitting, he said, a month later, I'm sitting at a table with all my kids. He said, everything that I felt like I had lost, I was getting things back. I remember that conversation with him of a whole nother, I think that's probably where I realized whatever I was angry or mad at growing up, there's another side to that story. That sometimes you just don't want to pay attention to. You're like, "Oh man, my dad's an alcoholic, or my dad's, this, or my dad's in jail, or and you think, well, this is the side that there's only one side of this story. And you don't, sometimes you don't ever get to see the other side. Mm-hmm. But I'll just tell you in that moment, there's a whole other side to the story that, when I tell the story now, it's a redemptive story. It's a redemptive story. There's hope and there's joy in it. Like if you'd have asked me to tell this story a long time ago, you'd have walked out here probably mad at somebody, instead.
What can you say? And I'm going to ask you to look into that camera and to the young man who's growing up in a situation like yours, whether it's divorce or dad's just not around or what it is. Look in that camera and tell that guy something he needs to hear.
Well, I'm going to tell you what tell my kids. So my sons, every night before they go to bed, I tell them never give up, fight hard. Since they've been born, they couldn't even speak. I tell them, don't you quit, don't you give up, and you fight hard. And I tell them that because I have no idea what is in front of them. I have no idea what the future is going to hold. I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow or 2 weeks from now. I don't know. But I know who holds the future for them. I know who does that. And so I don't want you to quit on your faith. I don't want you to give up on who God is. I don't want you to give up and quit. I don't want you to do that. So every night I tell them, never give up, fight hard. Never give up, fight hard. Before we go into any game, never give up, fight hard. Never give up, fight hard. That's all we tell them. And I would just tell you, that sounds maybe like, oh, they just repeat it now, but I guarantee at some point in their life, just like my life, I knew in my life I cannot quit. I can't give up. I can't give up on people. I cannot stop loving people. I cannot stop giving. I cannot stop doing the work of the Lord. I can't stop doing these things. I cannot give up. I can't quit because one day, I tell that because one day my kids are going to be married. And I don't want my sons to quit on their spouse. I don't want them to give up on their kids. So every day, never give up, fight hard. Never give up, fight hard. Over and over again, I keep telling that. And I'll tell you the same thing. Don't you quit and don't you give up. Don't get so close to what the Lord has called you to do. You get one step away and you walk away from it. Because of fear, anxiety, because of jealousy or hate or bitterness, step into the joy of the Lord. Step into that. And I'll tell you, it will restore something within your soul that will change your life. And they'll put you on a place, it'll put you in an area that you never thought you could be. Not because you did it, because the Lord is doing something in your life. He's building something new within you. I would say never give up, fight hard.
Your mom must be quite a lady.
She is. She's an awesome lady. Yeah.
Take a minute.
Prepare for later.
Take a minute to say something to your mom.
To my mom. To my mom. I'm proud of you. I'm proud you're my mom. Love you.
If we made a video for you to give to your dad today, could you look in that camera and say what you want to say to him?
I don't know. It's there's not anything in me that is mad. There's nothing in me that is hate. There's none of that. I mean, I would do anything for him. I think part of some of the fear is like, there's to look at him and tell him I love him doesn't bring a tear to my eye or like, hey, I am proud of you. I mean, I watched him, at his ceremonies, like people just like loving him, and it didn't make me angry. I was proud that was my dad. I'm proud of those things, and I'm proud of him.
Wow. So you're a script flipper. Yeah. You're a guy who came out of a not so fortunate situation. Yeah. And the reason we do this podcast is because there are a lot of guys out there like you, and they give up. Mm-hmm. They don't think there's any hope. There's a lot of dads out there who have messed up and they give up and don't think there's any hope. And so we just want to bring some hope. Mm-hmm. And you made a choice to change things. You made a choice to be a forgiver. You made a choice to be intentional. You made a choice to be a script flipper, to turn things around. And when we do that, they're consequences.
Yeah.
They're good consequences. So we want to share with you a little gift that we pulled together. This is one of those good consequences.
Okay.
And it's a gift for you, but it's also a way to show folks that, hey, when you do things right, good things happen. So this is just a little gift for you.
Man, it's just been so awesome to have someone like you as a mentor and as a brother in Christ.
Caleb Waid, you can't find one like him out there. He's a student pastor that loves his students. He knows how to fellowship to them, and he's a godly man to his wife and his kids.
One thing you showed me, not just through words, but your actions, is how to be calm in the midst of a storm.
Since then, it's been an incredible relationship. You've always been someone I felt comfortable talking to and someone that I could look up to.
You said some of the most practical words I've ever heard, and that was that the only difference between a regular Monday or Tuesday and our everyday life in this conference that we were attending, or whatever it was, is that we were carving out multiple times during our day when we were worshiping or being discipled by a believer, or just learning about the Lord, spending time in the Word. And if we carve out the same amount of time, or just are concentrated on finding time during our day in the week, we can have the same life-changing experience.
I'll never forget being that 14-year-old kid walking into Ridgecrest and meeting you. And man, from that moment, every time I showed up, you never forgot my name. Man, you always celebrated that I was present. You were always excited that I was there. And man, that truly changed my life.
We're thankful that you're ours. You're great husband, great dad. I think you've made an impact on so many people. We love you.
So that's just a little gift we give, Caleb. Any comment on that?
And you just don't, many times you just, you're just doing, and hoping. One of the biggest fears sometimes, I think I don't want to work hard at something that means nothing. And I don't want to pour myself out for something that's pointless. And I think sometimes you just have to reevaluate sometimes, is what I'm doing pointless, and what am I doing? Is it making a difference in the kingdom? And I think that many times will make you change things or refuel, and keep going. So, yeah.
Man, thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah.
I know it's a vulnerable story to have to share, but you're going to help somebody. Somebody is where you were.
Yeah.
And we want them to know that they can be where you are. So thanks for coming in and sharing that with us. And thanks for making an impact on kids for all over the country, really.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you guys having me, and enjoy what you guys do, love what you guys do, and man, can't wait to hear from everybody else too.
All right. Thanks for being a script flipper. Thanks for being part of the Script Flipper series.